Beaming around the world with the latest science and space news on Facebook Watch, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is Talkin' Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And as we power towards Christmas 2020, what a year it's been. Dr. Brad Tucker is here, the busy man that he is. Brad, thanks so much for a little bit of your time.
Yeah, lots of things happening in space, above and on Earth this week.
Absolutely. Well, we are planning some live coverage for next Sunday. We'll dive into that in the headlines in a second. But first, I want to let people know, as we do every week, where to find you on social media. At btucker22 on Twitter, Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Miramat86. And of course, Trekzone all over social media. Search for us, like, follow and subscribe. Ring the notification bell. Do all that sort of stuff. But because we are so busy as the year draws to an end, Brad, let's roll that sting where our voiceover guy tells us what's happening.
Talking Science Headlines.
That's right, it is headlines time, and Brad, a special edition of Talkin' Science is live streaming next Sunday morning as Hayabusa 2 returns to Earth. In an epic 90-minute live stream from 2:50 a.m, I'll be chatting with the Hayabusa 2 retrieval team who are in Woomera right now, working out all the logistics. Plus, Glenn Nagel from Tidbinbilla will drop by to chat about communicating with the spacecraft. And in a special guest appearance, Jason Dworkin, the project scientist for OSIRIS-REx, will beam in to chat about their asteroid tagging and sample return mission and how it parallels to Hayabusa 2. Brad, it wouldn't be Talking Science without you, so we'll have a chat as well as we wait to see the fireball blaze across the Cooper Beatty sky, because I have a camera that I am organising to face skyward to capture the fireball magic. It's going to be an early start to our Sunday, my friend.
It'll be a very early Sunday and an anticipated Sunday. So, we all hope it goes according to plan, and that they can find Hayabusa with its radio signal in the vast darkness of the Australian outback, which is literally what they're doing.
The good thing with the Australian outback, though, I think, is that there is just nothing out there. So as long as they've got...
Yeah, that is true. If you find something, it's going to be the right thing.
Exactly right. So it's going to be amazing. But yes, I'm lining up a webcam from an opal mine to face northwest, which is where it's going to be coming towards the Woomera protected zone there at the RAF base. So it's going to be a very exciting Sunday morning. It's going to be a very exciting 90-minute live stream. Looking forward to that one. Meanwhile, government grants have been awarded for the Scientist Taking Astronomy to Regional Schools project, or, and I know how much we love acronyms, the STARS project. I love this. This is one that you're passionate about and involved with.
Yeah, so it's something I started about 2 years ago, going on the road and visiting schools and groups all across Australia. And that was kind of done for the year as a pilot. And we applied for funding to kind of continue it. So, we managed every state and territory, and obviously we wanted to do more and do it again. And we were able to get a government grant, and especially in this hard financial time, to continue it. And that was a real excitement for us. So now the logistics of how do we actually do this, and being a little bit flexible with our plans next year relative to COVID and states, in order to pull it off.
A lot of Zooming, a lot of teleconferencing, I would imagine.
Yeah, look, we'll do obviously some online talks, but we do want to get to do some in-person stuff, and especially for visiting schools, doing astronomy events, and then giving them their own telescopes they can continue to fund.
Awesome. Well, students from the University of Western Australia have designed a rocket to do the reverse of what rockets are normally supposed to do. This one's going to be falling back to Earth from 30 kilometres, but that's okay because they're aiming to simulate microgravity.
Yeah, look, so they're taking up in a high-altitude balloon and then dropping it. And this is essentially what NASA's parabolic flights do anyways, right? They essentially, in a controlled airplane, they just nosedive in a very controlled way. And that's the feeling. It's like going on a roller coaster when it feels like your stomach's going up into you. That is experiencing some microgravity or less gravity. And that's what they're trying to simulate to do relatively cheap and I think quite creative way of doing simple microgravity experiments.
Now, here's another acronym because they've called their device the EMU, or the Experimental Microgravity Unit.
In space and astronomy, especially in Australia, we love naming them after animals. I know a few different emus around. You got to keep up the tradition. You got to play the part.
Talking Science, Stories of the Week.
Well, over in China, they've launched Changy'e 5 overnight and are aiming to be the first to bring back a lunar sample in over 40 years.
Yes, so this was an exciting an event for them. As you said, it hasn't happened since the mid 70s with the Russians going to the moon of a lunar return mission. We were just talking about in the headlines, all the asteroid sample return missions. Well, the moon's not to be forgotten. And, Changy'e 5, it's going to be the next big Chinese mission in terms of going to the moon. We saw Changy'e 4 in January last year when it landed on the far side of the moon. So it's a huge step in their space and lunar exploration program.
Yeah, the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program, as it's called, has had 4 successful lunar missions. Starting back in 2007, Changy'e 1 managed to just reach lunar orbit. So that's the first achievement. Changy'e 2 managed to duplicate that success. Then they landed and roved on the moon with Changy'e 3 in 2013, Changy'e 4 in 2019 on the far side of the moon, as you said, and now Changy'e 5, where they're hoping to land, grab a sample and return. Such an incredible feat in just 13 years.
It really is. You think about the Gemini and the Apollo programs, let's just say in the US, and that took, over a decade to actually get humans on the moon. And again, it took Russia a huge amount of time for their program. So, they're playing catch up, but they're doing it in a very efficient way. And as you said, they're doing some different things that in some ways are a bit more technically challenging. And I think kind of what's impressive is they know it's hard. In fact, they know Changy'e 5 may not work. And so, in fact, they built a whole second one, Changy'e 6. And this is essentially the backup that if 5 fails or doesn't reach its target or something goes wrong, they can quickly turn around and launch a 6. And if 5 works, then they can repurpose Changy'e 6 for Changy'e 7. So definitely some really creative ideas. And again, if we look to the Apollo era, all the Apollo missions each had their own mission, but they overlapped and, there was redundancies and training and stuff like that. So definitely some very, forward thinking, forward planning for what they know will be hard, but in the long run, a very big part of growing their program.
Yeah, well, it's brilliant that Changy'e 5 is on the way, and according to some information, Changy'e 6, the next mission will likely be 2023 or 2024, another sample return mission. So they've really just blasted through that barrier, and they're able to make all this work, and they're getting in there and getting it done.
Yeah, and look, the return mission itself will be, I think, quite interesting when we think about the lunar rocks that we've taken back. Well, this is landing in a different site. It's nearish Apollo 12's landing site, but a different site. And also they're going to dig down. They're going to dig down a couple of meters. And, if you think about your dirt at home, well, your garden may have some nice topsoil or something like that for 10, 20, 30 centimeters. But as soon as you start digging down, it gets into hard clay or it changes. So it can really change its composition depending on where you go and how deep you go. And so, we've talked a lot about ice and water on the moon. So this is a great example of, by digging down, what's further underneath the surface of these potential interesting places on the moon.
Now, it's heading for a region called Mons Rumka, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and sunrise will occur just before landing in that crater, which is brilliant. As you say, it's going to drill down, grab 2 kilos of rock samples. Now that in itself is impressive. Talking to OSIRIS-REx and knowing about Hayabusa, we're only talking a couple of 100 grams, so this 2 kilos of stuff is going to be brilliant and really allow scientists to sink their teeth into studying what the moon is made of. I don't think it's cheese.
That's right, exactly. Look, it will be interesting. And as you said, we saw with Hayabusa and OSIRIS-REx, it's not straightforward. And so there's a lot of things that can go wrong. But, they should know pretty quickly. And luckily, compared to Ryugu and Bennu, the targets for Hayabusa 2 and OSIRIS-REx, the moon is a lot closer, which means they'll get there soon, be able to quickly turn around and come back to Earth with their samples mid to late December, depending on the time frames. So definitely, instead of waiting 6 years, they only have to wait a week and a half.
Yeah, incredible. The total mission time is expected to take about 23 days, as you say, mid-December, late December. They've just lifted off in the last 24 hours, and they're going to be back before Christmas. That's a record pace.
It is, and it also just shows how close relatively the moon is. That it is closer in it. The moon is a very different ballgame from a lot of these other things. Even when we talk about Mars, proximity, it matters. It really matters in this case. And by being close, it means it can make the mission quicker. And so they know results, they can get on it, they can do all those important things a lot faster than waiting years before they know whether they have to launch the next one.
Now, I do want to ask, do we know whether China is going to share some of these samples with scientific communities around the world?
Well, look, it's hard to say. So China is actually still pretty open, about sharing the science and the data. They've done it with Mars. They've done it with other things. They've done lots of different sharing of data. We talked about when they're launching their Mars mission, how they cooperated. Whether they share the rocks back or not, it's hard to say because it also depends, on how much you get, right? If they only get, say, 100 grams for some reason, and there's not that lot to go, you don't want to spread it all around. Likewise, a lot of the NASA moon rocks are still locked up and they haven't let them out. Same with the Russian rocks. So it will be interesting to see what they choose to do and how they spread the study. Do they share the raw data of the composition? Do they allow samples to go out to other people to do different testing? Because the key is once you take it out of the sealed container, it's potentially contaminated. So all of these samples, they try and keep as many in the original container sealed away as possible and only let out a few at a time. So once it's out, it literally, the cat's out of the bag, so to speak. So they do want to be careful, just like any other group would want to be. And I think it'll probably partially be dependent on just how much they get.
You can get social with Trekzone. Australia's unofficial home of Star Trek is everywhere you are. Just search for Trekzone.
Now, on to our next story of the week, Brad, and Changy'e 5 might actually have passed the GNOME in space from Rocket Lab. This is cool because they've nailed their first ever booster recovery attempt.
We've talked a bit about, it's really growing company with our friends across the Tasman, focusing on these small satellites, and therefore small rockets. And they've kind of entered a new club, and that is reusing their rocket or getting their rocket. SpaceX obviously is famous for this. Blue Origin's been doing this as well. And it's amazing to see Rocket Labs being able to do this because, again, the key here is as soon as you just don't dump it in the ocean or in space and you reuse it, you're reusing it. So instead of the cost of one launch, it's now split over 2 launches or 3 launches. So the cost that used to be contained to 1 launch is now split over 2 or 3 or 4, which means those launches themselves are cheaper. And that is the name of the game. And that's why we've seen this success with, say, SpaceX.
Yeah, and even just being able to spread that cost of launch over 2 launches, that is effectively halving the cost to get your CubeSat or small satellite into orbit. That is a huge saving and not something to be taken lightly.
Exactly, that's right. It is a big deal, and it adds up really quickly. And again, this is the key here. The cheaper you can make it, the busier you'll be. That means the more launches can happen, the more science, the more technology, whatever, the more benefit, then you get more customers. And this is how we've seen the private space companies and this new space race be fueled, is this symbiotic relationship between getting the cost down to increase the technology, which drives demand, which then drives the cost more down, and so on and so on. And it works. And, and again, good on Rocket Labs. And I think, we're all cheering for them. And again, being selfishly here in Australia, it directly benefits us. We know that Rocket Labs already has launched some of our satellites, as we've talked about before. And so it means in the future our launches can be cheaper. So again, it's a win all around.
Absolutely. They're doing things a little differently to SpaceX and Blue Origin in that they're using some control systems to reorient the rocket after the payloads are deployed. Then they're firing a drogue parachute to slow its descent, and then a larger parachute to really put the skids on as it nears the ocean, and then it splashes down. And then the recovery vessel. So not as cool as SpaceX, where they can land it on a drone ship in the ocean, which is cool in itself. But to be able to actually bring this thing back through the atmosphere, reorientate it, and get it to just kiss the ocean, I think it's a marvelous feat of engineering.
It is, and you're right. And the key here is they're doing it differently. So again, they're doing it their own way, and they're also doing it their own way cost effectively. Because again, one of the small issues here is if they choose to do, say the SpaceX or Blue Origin, well, you need that fuel and those thrusters. You need that extra equipment. They're going for small rockets and therefore small payloads. They had to think of a different way. And it doesn't change it at all. And it's no different than recovering capsules in the ocean. So again, it's definitely a great step for them, a great step for the industry as a whole as well, having now multiple ways of rocket recovery and reusability.
And the next step, this is even cooler, because the next step that they want to do is capture it mid-air with a helicopter. It sounds like Elon Musk is in control of this company.
It sounds like Elon Musk is going to be jealous. Oh, I wanted to do that. Yeah, like I really think this is just now millionaires and billionaires just one-upping each other. Soon it'll be next will be a fighter jet. Then they'll actually just try and shove it into like a C-17 Hercules or something like that. Look, I think it's becoming a little bit Bond-esque there, but there's various good reasons they want to do it. And again, this is all about them trying to find the best cost-effective and efficient way. Yep. And also, there's just the simple fact that even if you don't end up fully reusing it and you recycle it, it's not ending up as another piece of junk in space or the ocean. And that's a big problem with this industry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm just trying to picture, they could get some rockets on the top of the rocket to kind of angle it horizontal to or parallel to the ground, then have the C-17 with the cargo door open and just slowly just letting it, and then it
almost like Knight Rider stuff.
Yes. See? These things are possible, Brad. Unfortunately.
Now we just need David Hasselhoff and we're set.
Well, unfortunately, something that isn't going to be able to be recovered and I think has been lost to the sands of time, the winds of change, whatever else it might be. Arecibo. We've talked about this poor little dish a little bit. It's not little, but we've been talking about this poor dish for quite a while. And unfortunately, it looks like it's destined for the scrap heap. Yeah,
we talked about when they had the second failure a couple of weeks ago. And how bad it is. In fact, they've released drone and satellite footage, and you can really see just how beaten up it is. And so the NSF, which is the National Science Foundation, the U.S. government science body, which has been maintaining and paying for it, has essentially said it is no longer cost effective to fix it and maintain it, and therefore has to go to the Great Telescope Graveyard in the sky. And it has struck a lot of emotion in the community for a lot of different reasons. And I don't think this is going to be the last we hear of this issue.
Yeah, it's sort of, I was reading up on this during the week. It's become a real occupational health and safety issue, a workplace health and safety issue now, to get out there and repair these snapped cables. The workers are going to be putting themselves at risk of further falling damage and other things as well. It just is unsafe to get out there and to repair it. And that's where the cost is obviously coming in. I was reading an article as well where one of the considerations was to have helicopters with the safety harnesses on the people attached to a helicopter. So if the gantry gave way, well, they'd be floating in midair, but at least the helicopter would have them and could fly them to safety. But there's a lot of money involved in that sort of operation, and it really comes down to a point of you have to find a point where, as you say, it's no longer cost effective to repair.
And then you have the added problems where it's no longer the biggest single dish. China's built FAST, which is a 500-meter dish, so a lot bigger than Arecibo. So it's like a lot of other facilities we have in astronomy. At some point, when you're 50 or 60 years old, either you find a new way to keep it up, or it does have to be decommissioned. You can't run and pay for everything, especially as you want bigger and newer toys. That is a reality of it. It is sad to see, and there are some interesting conversations happening, because one of the big issues is this is a big part of the Arecibo astronomical community, the scientists and astronomers there, the local community in terms of employment and stuff. So there is some impacts for those in Puerto Rico that are being discussed, and how do you minimize that as well? And look, it had the hurricane in 2017, it had the earthquake in 2019. It's just been one after another, and it's had a hard run in Puerto Rico in general, and especially that dish there. And again, these are these hard decisions that have to be made, and it's striking a lot of emotion in the radio astronomy community, especially.
Yeah, well, even though Arecibo isn't the largest anymore, it's still got a speciality in that it can do radar astronomy. Now, this was a really cool thing that I learned about this week, that it's not just receiving the light and analysing that light, but it's analysing what it's sending out, and that's allowing it to do observations of the planets in the solar system, and it's taught us quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's done some amazing science with, as you said, with these asteroid rotation rates and properties. A lot of these near-Earth asteroids that people have talked about and seen, the data and images have actually come from Arecibo. It's been that same technology has been used to send the Arecibo radio message for extraterrestrial intelligence. As you said, they've used it for planets and dwarf planets and moons. So it definitely has a different capability than, as you said, a lot of the other dishes. So it's not like the science is just old. It's still quite cutting edge science. So it's trying to weigh all these factors, and you'd like to see everything continue. Part of me realizes that's just not possible. And we've had our own issues here at Mount Stromlo, where I work in Siding Spring, where we've had technology 50, 60, 70 years ago. We just can't do everything anymore, especially if we want the next generation thing. So it's trying to find the best way of keeping it used. And then when you add on, you have a facility that is already struggling, and then it's just battered hardware-wise and safety-wise, and there's no way to keep it up. Something has to give.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I do wonder, because the sinkhole is still there. I wonder whether they could build a newer and better Arecibo.
Well, look, that's right. There still will be this hole in the mountain. What they can do with it, I don't know. And again, I think that, these are the discussions that are going to just start to be had around the community, both locally and internationally, to see what is the next steps for that location and that dish and the people.
Absolutely, Brad. We'll watch this space for Arecibo, and of course, when decommissioning does happen, we will, of course, pay our respects here on Talkin' Science. There are just a couple of episodes left in our 2020 production year, Brad, so looking forward to diving into the stories of the week and the headlines next week. But as I say every week, it's fun to pick apart the stories of the week with